Thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm really excited about this panel. We've got the future training for teachers. So if that's the panel that you're looking to participate in, you are in the right place. This panel is put together to discuss the pathway for educators, has gone through drastic changes due to pandemic and beyond. What does our teaching landscape require to ensure future success? The session will discuss issues related to tech, social health, and much, much more. I've had the pleasure of having conversations with each of our panelists before today, and really excited for them to share what they're working on and some of the things that, that they want to make sure that this audience is aware of. So before we get too far into this, I definitely want to give a shout out to our education panel track sponsor, which is Kirkwood Community College. And if I understand correct, our room host, Stephen, will share a 30-second video from Kirkwood, and then we'll get started with this panel.
Hello, and welcome to the 2021 Iowa Ideas Conference. I'm Lori Sundberg. I'm the president of Kirkwood Community College, and we are proud to be a sponsor of this year's conference. The Iowa Ideas Conference brings educational sessions on a variety of topics to Iowans from all over the state. It is a terrific conference, and we are proud to be a part of it. So on behalf of the 2021 Iowa Ideas Conference, welcome, and I hope you enjoy your time at the conference. Thank you.
If you've got friends that work at Kirkwood or anybody in your network that's at Kirkwood, please thank them for their generous sponsorship for Iowa Ideas and specifically this education track. So my name is David Tominski. I currently serve as the Chief Relationship Officer for a nonprofit in Cedar Rapids called the New Bohemian Innovation Collaborative. That's a mouthful, so we usually just refer to it as NewBoCo to save you a few extra syllables. But I have been really passionate about education for quite a while, so I was excited to have the opportunity to be the moderator for today's panel. Our nonprofit focuses on education, entrepreneurship, and innovation. And early on, we were looking at free ways to get kids to learn how to code, and now that has grown into so much more. And it's exciting to see all the changes that have happened in our community over the last 10 years. We're not here to really listen to me. We're here to hear from these four amazing panelists that we put together. So I'd like to introduce them, have them actually introduce themselves. Well, we've got Bridget Castelluccio. She's with Grantwood Area Education Agency. We've got Mark McDermott with the University of Iowa. We've got Mark Butland with the Iowa EdTech Collaborative. And then we've also got Samantha Dalby, who I am lucky enough to work with day to day at NewBoCo. So I'm going to kick it to you guys in that order, if you're okay. Just give them a brief update. Want to let them know who you are and what you do, and why you think you're here today.
All right, so I'm Bridget Castelluccio, and my background is I have an undergrad degree in early childhood elementary education, a master's degree in effective teaching. Undergrad was Truman State, aka Northeast Missouri State, many years ago. Mount Mercy for that master's degree. And then in 2019, I became a nationally board certified teacher. I have taught in Iowa in Johnston, Bettendorf, and for the past 13 years, Cedar Rapids. Last year, I got to teach virtually in my basement for the whole school year to two awesome groups of fourth graders, AM and PM. And David was able to come and visit us virtually. This year, I am launching something new. I am a digital learning consultant at Grantwood AEA, Area Education Agency. I have been innovative with tech integration for the past 10 years on my own and with different grant opportunities. So this allows me to take that knowledge and learn more, and kind of how do we do innovative practices along with best instructional practices to really spark learning with kids.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Bridget. And I retell this story often about how we met. You came to the school board with your fourth grade class and presented, and then invited school board members to attend that class. So if anybody here is interested in what's happening inside actual real live classrooms these days, Bridget's been an amazing point of contact. So sorry to lose you in the Cedar Rapids School District, but excited that the AEA gets you and that you're able to kind of spread all the knowledge and passion that you have to so many more schools. So we'll go over to Mark McDermott with the University of Iowa for a quick introduction.
Thanks, David. Good morning, everybody. Mark McDermott. I'm currently the Associate Dean for Teacher Education and Student Services here at the University of Iowa. I've been here this is my 8th year at the university. I'm also a faculty member, clinical faculty member in science education. So really prior to this year, a lot of my time was spent teaching methods courses for both elementary students and also for our secondary students who are going to be science teachers. Prior to being here at the university, I was at Wartburg College for 3 years in a similar role as a faculty member in science ed. And then before that, I was a high school teacher and coach for 14 years. So I was fortunate enough to teach at New Hampton and Roland Story. And then I was here in Iowa City at Iowa City West for 9 years. And so appreciate the chance to be here. I think I'm here because I help oversee our teacher education program here at Iowa. But what I'm really looking forward to is hearing from everybody else on the panel and everybody else here, because I think that's one of the things that's really going to help us as we navigate the future of teacher education is hearing from lots of stakeholders. And so I'm excited to be able to do that today.
Awesome. Welcome, Mark. And then we'll go to our second Mark. So I don't know if we're going to have nicknames for this panel. So Mark Butland, will go to you with the Iowa EdTech Collaborative.
Thank you, David. Good morning, everyone. I'm Mark Butland. I'm the director of the Iowa EdTech Collaborative. And if you haven't heard of that, that's because it's brand new. There have been a number of people working behind the scenes for the last 3 years to bring this together, but it was officially funded through the governor and through a federal grant. And one of the first orders of business was to hire a director, and I was fortunate enough to get that call. Prior to this, which was the 1st of July, I had been the dean of the campus, the Iowa City campus for Kirkwood Community College. So I came into this position as a seasoned higher education administrator. Before that, I served as a faculty member for 30 years and then retired. And rather than sensibly staying with retirement, I decided to move into administration. So it's been an interesting road, and I think what I'm excited about with my opportunity through this panel is to share the message that one of the things that happened during the pandemic that was very informative for us at Kirkwood Community College was the faculty got together, and you just saw a video from our esteemed president, and she was very encouraging of this, that we got the faculty together and we talked about, how's it going? I'm thinking about Bridget and her having to convert everything to online. And this was a very real crisis for a lot of faculty. And one of the things we learned was coming together was not just a way to vent and let off steam, but it was also a way to share what were emerging good practices. And I'd like to develop that theme when I get an opportunity later in this panel, because I think that's the most fruitful direction for our immediate future of teacher training is this idea of collaboration. So pleased to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Welcome. And then last but definitely not least, we'll turn it to Samantha Dalby with NewBoCo for a quick intro.
Thanks, David. Good morning, everyone. I'm Samantha Dalby, and I am currently the Director of K-12 Education with NewBoCo. And I oversee all of our K-12 programming, which includes direct-to-student programs where we have mentors and staff that work directly with K-12 students, and then also through professional development for teachers, primarily in the computer science area. That's where we came into this really to fill some of those gaps early on. And my background is not in education. I'm not sticking with the trend here. So I actually started off as a software engineer and worked in industry for several years and found my way to education through volunteering at first, getting connected with NewBoCo, and then realizing that computer science was still not a part of most schools' curricula in Iowa. And the way I like to tell the story is I got mad about that. And when I get mad, I want to do something. And so I found myself making a career change and helping to fill those gaps. And that's one of the things that really excites me about what I'm doing now is looking for what we expect to be there and what isn't, and then trying to either fill that or work with others to partner to fill that. And as part of that, especially given my background, I work very closely with teachers, with administrators, with all of these people that are on the panel to make sure that we're coming at it from a holistic approach. And specifically in this past year, we've been asked more and more from districts on how to integrate computer science. And so I see that as a partnership with those teachers that have their content area expertise, and then bringing in my content area expertise to partner those together. So I enjoy working on statewide initiatives all the way down to classroom teachers. So looking forward to the conversation here about where everything is going.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for agreeing to participate in this panel. I was actually excited to know that not all five of us knew each other prior, right? I mean, the education is a really big, a big area. So there's lots of different angles that we're coming at it. So I was excited about the diversity of those backgrounds for each of the panelists. So, one thing that I wanted to call out maybe to start, right, just even in the name with future in it, right? I think we've heard a lot in the state of Iowa about Future Ready Iowa. And I was just looking it back up to just verify all the different things that fall underneath that umbrella. But it was designed to connect Iowans to the education and training required for good paying jobs and careers to improve people's lives. Future Ready Iowa goal is to have 70% of Iowans with education and training beyond high school by 2025. I remember the first time I heard that, it seemed like 70% sounded low. And then you realize, that's a pretty lofty goal for us to have, right? And then some of those areas that they're focused on are last dollar scholarships, employer innovation funds, registered apprenticeship, child care challenge, summer youth program grants. So again, when we think about education, there's so many things that need to be tackled in order for us to be successful and thrive in the state of Iowa. So I just wanted to call some attention to that. So as we're kind of talking through just, how some of your work, and maybe that's the first question, is how does some of the work that each of you are doing connect with the efforts from the state and through Future Ready Iowa? So I'll see if it works, if I just kind of lob that over to each of the four of you. And if I need to call on you, I certainly will, but I'll send that over to you to maybe just tackle. Bridget, for me, you're the one highlighted. So I don't know if you were making some moves.
I hit my microphone. Oh, okay. I think when I think, and I've been doing more Future Ready in this role, which excites me to see what's happening at a larger level. I've just, kind of been concentrated in that elementary world, which happens. Future Ready is that innovative thinking, collaboration, partnership, community building, different skill sets, and also, but just good practices of communication. What do all students need in whatever they end up landing in? And I think when we think of teachers, we need to approach it in that same way. What are some innovative practices and methods that we need to be including in that progression of becoming a teacher and enticing people? I'm going to do a big shout out. I love to hear stories of Samantha, that I was not an educator and I became kind of into education. I think we're missing that piece in our educational system when we look at very successful platforms around the world. That often happens. And that's where then we get that authentic real world learning experiences that we can't always get just from a methods class. When we get those real practicing professionals that then go, I want to share this with kids. Wow, yay.
Exciting.
I can, David, I told you a story, and some people may have heard me I've told this story a couple of times. One of the very last in-person conferences that I went to prior to the pandemic was a conference on learning at Ohio State. And there was a speaker there whose job title was educational evangelist for Google. And he obviously had certain products that he was most interested in. But one of the things that he did when he talked to us was he pulled his cell phone out of his pocket and he said, I have a 5-year-old daughter, and my 5-year-old daughter is starting kindergarten this year. And he was holding up his phone and he said, this is the worst piece of technology that she will ever interact with. Everything she's going to interact with for the rest of her life is going to be better faster, more, it's going to, and his point was, are we preparing our college students? And, for me, I was thinking, am I preparing the teachers that I'm working with to go into a world and go in classrooms where that's the sort of student they're interacting with, that they're creating classrooms to help that student navigate the fact that their world's going to keep change at a faster rate than it's been changing, become more integrated and connected and faster and all those sorts of things. Or are we preparing teachers to sort of go teach in the classrooms that we grew up in, right? And even the classrooms that they grew up in, and that recognition of even our 19 and 20-year-olds here at Iowa right now, or in any of our teacher ed programs, the way they learned is hopefully going to be different than the way that they are teaching students and those sorts of things. And so that's not an easy task. We have a lot of people that they love teaching because they've had great teachers and they've had great experiences, and they want to go out and recreate those experiences for students. And that's not a terrible perspective to bring at all. But what we have to remember is, learning to teach is not just about learning to do what your teachers did. It's not just about learning to recreate. It's about learning to be innovative. It's about learning to be collaborative. It's about learning to pull in these different resources that you might not anticipate are an important part of that teaching and learning experience. And so hopefully that's one of the things that I think all of us are doing, but hopefully here and in teacher ed programs, we're starting to think about those sorts of things and how do we create experiences here in the teacher ed program to facilitate that kind of thinking and innovation when our pre-service teachers leave us.
That's great. And I appreciate you sharing that. And I did, like when we were talking last week in preparation for this, when you were, sharing that story, just the idea that phone is the worst piece of, it's not a bad piece of technology.
Right.
It's pointing out the fact that it's only getting better, right? There's only going to be more and more capabilities. I mean, maybe the term better isn't the right way to use it, right? I mean, I think we can get into another conversation about that, but the advancement in technology and how much that's going to change for that person in kindergarten right now, a 5-year-old, just think by the time they graduate from high school, what that technology is going to be capable of. And I appreciated the point that you were making too about the future classrooms and, what is that going to look like, and not teaching in the classrooms of, 20, 30, 40 years ago, but really trying to imagine what that future classroom looks like. And Bridget, I mean, and that's, just kind of brings me back to the experience that I had with your 4th grade classroom is a great example of what I think the future classrooms look like, right? We're moving in that direction. So appreciate that. Any other thoughts on that? I think I just wanted to start with that because, the state is certainly making efforts in the world of education. There's lots of different things that are out there. And, if anybody that is in the audience today is not aware of Future Ready Iowa, I certainly would encourage you to go out there and take a look at it. Those Future Ready summits are things that happen across the state. I think they're doing a good job of just informing people of what the opportunities are. There's so much more that we can be doing. So I definitely don't want to pretend like we've got it right. I just feel like there's lots of really good efforts that are happening that deserve our attention, right? So if you're not already aware of those, I would certainly encourage you to take a look at those. One of the things I want to talk about, just empowered professionals, right? So Bridget, when we were talking, I liked the approach that you had because it was, certainly we're talking about future training for teachers, but when you were talking about empowered professionals for education, I like the approach that you had where you kind of called out lots of different groups. So, already I'm hearing the theme of collaboration and integration, lots of different parties that are involved in this. So wanted to maybe see if you would kind of expound on that a little bit more about like what it means to be an empowered professional in education and what are some of the opportunities that you see, not just for the folks that are on this panel, but everybody in this audience.
So empowered professionals, and I kind of use ISTE, which is the International Society of Technology and Education. So it does have that lens of technology because I think, as Mark said, it's here, and what we have right now is going to look totally obsolete in 2 years. Like we're like, that's a hunk of junk. But there's just some key components, and I think really it's not just in education, but we should empower each other as a society for education with these. So it's like being a learner, continuously learning what's out there, what's new, being a citizen, and what does that mean in education, and how do we bring that authentically to students and to ourselves as a professional. Leadership, collaboration, designing. So really thinking close to the outside of the box, if you can get out of the box. Designing what does education look like, and what should it look like for our students and for the professionals in it. A facilitator, organizing all of the stakeholders, and then analyzing, really looking at what is successful and what is not, what's worked, what's not, and what do students and teachers and the communities need.
Yeah, fantastic. Any of our other panelists have thoughts on that? Just again, like, I think about what it means to be empowered, right? To be able to give that and to share that with others, and how much value that we get as a community out of that mindset. So any additional thoughts from our other panelists?
I'll kind of expand on that a little bit from my perspective, because a lot of times I get brought in for like district initiatives, which is like the worst spot to be in as a presenter, when a district is like, this is what we're doing, everyone get on board. And then I get to stand in front of everyone and be like, yay, I know how most of you are feeling right now, but let's work with it. But I think it's sharing those ideas, and then letting the teachers figure out what best fits them and their students. So it's not having a one size fits all application. It's not even the concept is the same, especially from my perspective of like integrating computer science into every subject, right? I get the PE teachers that are like, we don't use computers. Why do I have to deal with computer science or music or second grade? Like I don't have enough time to do this. So we have to step back and think about that broader picture of what that topic means, and then see how it supports what you already are doing. It's not adding additional burden. It's trying to build on that. And it's really enabling those teachers to figure out what the right fit is. And so that's where a lot of times I'm working with them on what they're already doing, and I want them to explain to me what's happening in their classroom. And I start giving them the tools to make those identifications of connections, and starting to break down some of those silos that we have in education, which in some cases are good to go in deep into a content area. But then I think what I was hearing from Mark and Bridget is we also need that collaboration and that expansion of ideas as well. And how do we fit these things together? Because eventually the students are going to graduate and have to do that on their own. So how do we, and when's it appropriate to do that? And I think that's something that going forward in teacher training, we need to maybe include that in that piece of not just here's content knowledge to help you, but also what does that look like, and help them think through what that can look like in innovative ways that are supporting education as a whole.
Awesome. To carry on with that integration piece, McDermott, when we were talking, I hope you don't mind, I'm going to start calling you by last name just to make it easier. We've talked I think in each of the conversations that we had, integration just kept coming up. There was something that you said in our conversation that really resonated with me, because we were so focused on STEM and STEAM, right? So science, technology, engineering, and math. Sometimes we were seeing the A get added for art. And one of the comments that came out of those conversations is that like STEM was supposed to be that integration, right? And it never seemed to necessarily get that way. And you started to still see silos. So it's still like people would like, well, I'm teaching science, right? I mean, kids learning science, so I'm doing STEM, right? I was doing math, all these things. And then, but it was interesting to think about that there were still some silos that were existing. So trying to think about reimagining, right? Going back to when we started talking about STEM, and, the folks that were probably at that table having those discussions, wanting integration to be part of it. So, where did that break down, and what can we do differently in the future so that we can make sure that integration is in fact a piece that doesn't lose the focus it deserves?
Yeah, and I would say I think there's some great examples of where it didn't break down, where it did. I think there have been some situations where people have captured what I would argue is really that core idea of integration underlying that whole STEM idea. But I mean, in my past life, last year, when I was a science ed faculty member, and that was sort of my focus with methods, I wasn't shy about saying, look, I'm big S little Tim. Like my background is science. I'm trying to help people understand how to, in my case, teach people about core scientific concepts, right? I think we're probably living through a time right now where it might seem like, hey, there's some value in our citizens understanding some core scientific ideas. But I would argue you don't really truly understand the core scientific ideas unless you can apply and utilize math in order to understand relationships, or utilize, like Samantha's saying, utilize the technology as an avenue for better, deeper understanding of the science. You can apply it in engineering context. So when I would teach people about how to teach science, the STEM part of it for me was not sort of a category of, yeah, we're doing science, therefore it's STEM. It was, we're trying to help students understand core conceptual ideas in science by very purposefully bringing in and integrating the other three STEM disciplines. And I would argue, you know, you can't do that without reading well, without writing and communicating well, without, you know, being able to listen and speak and discuss. And so in my mind, that's what the integration idea with STEM, or really with any discipline, would be, that when we're dealing with these concepts in real life, in the real world, we're just naturally bringing in all these other areas. And therefore, like, just like Samantha said, I was, you know, shaking my head about, we're not losing time in the classroom by integrating computer science in. We're finding ways to connect, and we're more authentically and accurately, you know, conveying what real life is like. And therefore, we need to think about, how do we develop planning techniques, instructional techniques that really center that and focus on that, and bring that into the way we prepare people to think about learning and think about teaching.
Awesome. Any additional thoughts on that?
I could take that maybe a step further as I listen to Mark, and I'm thinking about bringing people together, and this idea of silos that Bridget mentioned, and the challenge with that. You know, we know a couple of things about silo busting because we've been at it for a while. And one of the things we know is to build a culture where it's okay for people to collaborate, where there's safety around risk, right? As long as we're learning lessons. But then the other thing is, we know that you create cross-functional teams to tackle specific tasks. And that gets people to see other perspectives from other silos, and pretty soon those silos begin to become more permeable. And I think that when I think about teachers, one of the things that is very clear to me was highlighted in Samantha's comment when she said that, you know, she was a software engineer and became frustrated and decided, well, dang it, I'm going to become part of the solution. Teachers are mission driven. I'm honored when I get a chance to talk with teachers and with my faculty at Kirkwood. Time and again, I came to the realization that these talented people could easily be working in the private sector, could easily be working fewer hours, and probably making more money. Why? Well, because they're mission driven. That's why they chose this path. So we have a really energized, talented group of people who right now are in an environment where they're realizing there are some limitations that they're just not comfortable with accepting. And I think once everyone is able to take a deep breath, and we get a little bit past kind of the fatigue that we're experiencing as a society, there's an opportunity. And this opportunity, I think, looks a lot like a culture where it's risk friendly, and a cross-functional group of teachers who meet maybe over coffee, maybe once a month, to talk about what are the pain points that they're seeing in the classroom. What are the things that, gosh, they can commiserate together on? And wouldn't it be terrific, and this is my challenge, wouldn't it be terrific if there was a way to create in that, sort of from the grassroots, a community of practice that was not only articulating the tough spots or those pain points, but also then had an entrepreneurial mindset that was empowered to risk trying something new and talking about it and collecting these new ideas. And then maybe even from that could emerge the teacher entrepreneur. And that's what the EdTech Collaborative is really excited about. And there are some great examples here locally in Iowa. Pear Deck comes to mind, where you have mission-driven teachers who realize, wow, we can do better than this. Let's create a solution. And time and hard work and fortunate circumstances came together to make that a really big deal that caught on nationally because it was such a good product. These were just teachers, just like the teachers who are listening to our show today. So to me, that's a very exciting opportunity. And the EdTech Collaborative is very interested in helping encourage those kinds of conversations. And the folks on our panel today are participating in those kinds of thoughts and plans as well. So teachers, are such an asset to all of this. And as we think about how we move forward and how we take advantage of new technologies and new opportunities, empowering teachers and listening to teachers and then helping them help us move forward is key.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that. And then, and you touched on a lot of things that I wanted to make sure that we hit on, Mark, just the fact that the Iowa EdTech Collaborative being in existence in the state of Iowa is a really big deal, right? The focus on an EdTech cluster and what does that mean? And there's so many different organizations that I think are interested in this work and interested in helping our entire community be successful. So really excited to see the direction of that, the organizations that came together to really form the foundation for that and then seeing that potential growth. So appreciate that. I want to hit on one thing just a little bit more while we're on the subject, because you had mentioned something in our conversation, and I'm passionate about entrepreneurship and education. And I often refer to where those two things collide is where you're going to find me. You talk about entrepreneurship as a pathway, right? Anyone's path to a good life can be found through entrepreneurship. So can I have you just elaborate a little bit more on that? We talk a lot about a lot of different types of education, but entrepreneurial education and what that actually means and why I think there's value in that, even at those really young ages.
Yeah, thank you. I'd love to talk more about that. I think I'm probably the least among the panelists, though, to speak about it because it's a new world to me. But I, in referencing Mark's comments earlier about STEM, I think about that typically when we're envisioning the STEM student, we're picturing a student maybe who is going to be propelled to an advanced degree at a four-year school and then on to graduate school. But entrepreneurship as a part of the curriculum speaks to a broader group than that. It speaks to maybe a daughter from a blue-collar family who discovers that, wow, this robotic stuff is just really cool. And maybe it never occurred to her, or maybe there's no support in her environment for her to be thinking about a master's degree in robotics engineering or what have you. But that doesn't mean she has to be out. That doesn't mean we lose that little potential Einstein, right? Maybe instead we hook her because it's within her reality to imagine doing something entrepreneurial around that. Maybe it starts with setting up a little shop and creating an important little piece or what have you. So I think there are a lot more on-ramps through entrepreneurship as a part of the curriculum than there might be just in the traditional path of going to a four-year school or even going to the community college and then to the four-year school. I think it enriches the options that are available. And I think those options are most likely exercised by traditionally underserved folks. So when I think about closing equity gaps, I think one of the most important things we can do is to work entrepreneurship into our curricula at an early age, and then encourage everyone to participate. Everyone, be thinking about your future in terms of going into business for yourself. And by the way, that's no small issue. Most of the economy runs on small businesses, right? So it's an important piece of our future.
Any additional comments from the rest of the panel?
I'll piggyback a little bit because he mentioned Pear Deck, and I actually was on a Pear Deck webinar last night doing a certification, and we know that has local ties to Iowa. What I didn't realize, but learned last night, was that there's another program that I used last year virtually. It's called GimKit. It's kind of a gaming review. My kids loved it, and it was created by 2 high school students. So I think about, like, if we bring in to our future teachers that thought of entrepreneurship, real authentic tasks, and bring it at the training level so that they're ready to embed it, because I do think it needs to be embedded into from littles on. Like, maybe they don't even have to wait till they finish high school to, I mean, it's now like, it used to be free, and then the whole conversation was, well, guess what? I mean, it caught big attention with the pandemic, and there's probably 2 high schoolers that are going to do very well. So, I think that when we give teachers that, it's that empowerment and thinking about that entrepreneurship and embed that within teacher training, whether you're going through it or you're in it, it goes down. If we want to model it, if we want our kids to do it, we need to model it ourselves in some way to really make it stick.
That's great.
What
I appreciate
if I can,
those
David,
comments.
add into like the theme, I think someone mentioned earlier, like the environment of safety. And if this is going to be possible, and if we want students to learn these skills and we want them to learn it through their teachers modeling these skills, we need to make sure that the teachers are operating in an environment that accepts, encourages, and provides a safe way for them to try and to fail. One of the biggest things I want is more failure in schools, which sounds odd, but I want students to practice that early and often so that it's not terrifying and they don't shut down when they experience it later in life, because it's going to happen at some point. And we need teachers to be able to model that if we actually want that to happen and not just keep speaking to it. So it's one big problem I see as a disconnect, where we say one thing that we want, but is it really possible to make it happen? And do teachers really feel empowered and safe to try something and say, well, that didn't work, or wow, that really didn't work, and what did I learn from it? And I don't know, maybe others have thoughts on how we can make that change, but I think that's a big shift in some districts I see, like, oh yeah, that makes sense, and boom, they're doing it. But I think it's, overall for every district, that's going to be a much slower process.
I think from my vantage point, entrepreneurship is more about encouraging people to start and take risks and to be supported, right? So there's so much work that I think that I've been lucky enough to be a part of, that just encouraging people, what is an entrepreneurial mindset? And to me, it's just taking the idea and taking that first step and starting. You don't need to have all the answers. There's going to be, call it failure along the way. I think often people refer to failure as learning, because it is, right? If you let failure just be failure and then you just move on, then it is only that, right? But if you actually take that as a learning opportunity, so taking that risk, allowing people to be vulnerable, but making sure that they're supported along the way. Go ahead. Sorry.
I think that's a really good point, that it's about that first step, right? Risk becomes incrementally easier the further you get walking the plank. So it's that first step that's a doozy, right? And I think, Bridget mentioned the game that I guess that was some software that was related to gaming that her kids were talking about. And I think there are a couple of provocative, easy ways that we can encourage students to take that first step, right? I think games are a natural way to get students interested in coding and in STEM related topics, right? Because it brings out that playfulness. And a couple of us are working on an idea related to game design and how we encourage high school students to learn computer skills by creating games. Educational games would be ideal. But the other way that I think we can get that first step that sort of minimizes the risk by distraction is passion. And I want to reference a group that I'm working with that's connected to Don Bolus at the University of Iowa Entrepreneurship, the Jacobson Entrepreneurship Center. She invited me to come and talk to one of the high school academy classes. And I talked to them about the mental health care crisis that we're facing in K-12. And I invited them, it was an entrepreneurship class, so I invited them to consider their peers and the people they know and the people they love, and to think about what they really need. These kids know, they're seeing it. They know exactly what's going on. And so then Dawn took that and empowered this group to start thinking in terms of what entrepreneurial things can we come up with? And notice again, this wasn't couched as profit-driven. This was a mission-driven kind of thing, right? And those kids boldly took that first step, right? And now I'm a mentor for that group as they're moving forward to create something from nothing that will meet this challenge that they're seeing, in reality, in real time there in their schools, right? So I think we can make entrepreneurship more approachable and minimize the risk by having fun through gaming and that sort of thing, and also by discovering the passions and empowering the students to make a difference.
What's really interesting to me, like this is, I would not consider myself in any way, shape, or form an expert on entrepreneurial thinking or integration into the school. But as I've listened to all three of you talk about it, I keep going back. There's some core things that I think we really encourage our students who are thinking about being teachers to think about in their own classrooms. One of them is building off of what the students' backgrounds, what the students already know, but also what the students are really interested in, right? That's an equity issue that we really truly are thinking about the students' backgrounds and building off what they wonder, what they are, what their questions are, what their missions are, what their sources, right? That can happen in kindergarten. That can happen in preschool, right? Like those are things where it probably happens better in kindergarten and preschool, to be honest, that I think those students a lot of times are better at really just asking their questions out loud and not feeling sort of shut down. We can, and we should, we talk a lot about encouraging students to say things out loud in class that they're not sure about, right? I mean, I was a perfect example. I didn't talk in school unless I knew absolutely positively that I had the right answer. I didn't want to ever say anything out loud that I wasn't sure about. And we need the exact opposite. And everything, what you guys are talking about, it's all that, right? That we encourage students to communicate unsettled knowledge out loud in classrooms and in outside of classrooms in any learning experience. That's foundational. And then I even go all of Bridget taking your fourth graders to the school board. Authentic audiences. What are we doing to put our students in front of audiences that are not the teacher? How does the teacher facilitate that? How does the teacher figure out ways to do that so that the teacher is figuring out things the teacher needs to know? What are the students understanding and not understanding? But the students are getting these opportunities to do these things. Like those are, whether we call them entrepreneurial, education or not, those are core aspects of what we know about how people learn best. So let's emphasize that those things need to be integrated into our classrooms. And for us, take a step back and say, how do we get people who are going out to be teachers recognize the importance of that? Because we're asking them to do that as students. We're modeling that for them as students, those sorts of things. So I love it. I appreciate, this is.
Yeah, fantastic. Fantastic. This grassroots, what's happening in the classroom, talking to teachers, talking to students, right? Empowering them to be part of this process. And I think so often it feels like that's been taken away from them, right? There's all these other things that we're being told need to happen. So really just, trusting teachers, trusting students to be able to drive their education, I think is fundamental, right? Bridget, you would use the term edge of the box, right? So we talk about, out of the box thinking, and I like the way that you had just referred to it as edge of the box and, innovative thinking and, just kind of pushing the limit, right? Not necessarily trying to break it. It's like, let's not just jump out of the box and go as far away as possible, but let's think about some of those things that are happening right there on the edge. Do you want to expound on that a little bit more? Yeah.
So David and I talked, when I was in the classroom, my most recent was at Kenwood Leadership Academy, and we did the 7 habits of effective leaders. But we also had an image. We did a lot of collaboration as a staff, and we had this image of, because there are expectations of students, requirements that they need, requirements for teachers. We have teaching practices and standards for our license. So we do have a box. However, if we're just always in that middle of that box and not getting close to that edge, or maybe like, oh, I'm going to put my foot over the edge. So we had a visual that I personally hung in my room. Maybe not everybody did, but I did, because this is my thinking. Like, how can I need to live in the box because those, have been stated, but I need to be like, pushing that box a little bit. Maybe that box isn't made of cardboard. Maybe it's a little more pliable. And so that push and pull, because I think that's where true change happens, is when we are at that edge, and pushing this, because then maybe the things inside the box will change. So the box doesn't have to be this just all, like we've talked about, it's not the past. So that's kind of my, like, be innovative inside the box, but be on that edge, or what's this made of? Maybe we could make this something different that moves and stretches it out a little bit.
Right. That's fantastic. Anything in addition that we want to talk about that? I don't know about you guys, but I'm looking at the clock and just how fast our time seems to be disappearing. And I think maybe I share this with everybody that's in this session right now. I want to talk about this for the rest of the day at least. But unfortunately, we've got an entire conference happening beyond this. So we will be done in about 15 minutes. Just wanted to call that attention. There is, I think we've talked about, in some of the conversations we've had, just like diversifying the workforce, trying to recruit teachers, and how hard that is, right? So, I think a few of you had used the term pre-service, and it's just like, what are we doing in the front end? So the truth is that we're not going to be able to handle future classrooms and future teachers if we don't have teachers in the future. So what are we doing? And what are some of the ideas that we have to bring people into the field, to encourage them, and then not just to get them into the field, but then to support them? I think that was one of the things that came through in a few of the conversations. It's not just about bringing people in, making sure that they feel like this is a field for them, but also making sure that they get the support and the scaffolding that they need to be truly successful in whatever the future holds. So I'm going to lob that one over to all four of you and see who wants to take a bite first.
I'm happy to jump in just with a quick observation, maybe as my colleagues are thinking about this. Technology is changing the role of teaching in questionable ways. I don't want to sound like a Luddite here, because my job is to support the integration of the best technology into education. But one of the things that I think is positive in our best future with technology is that shifting role of our faculty, that teachers have an opportunity to maybe shift more into a just-in-time coach sort of position. And to me, that's really exciting. And we're beginning to get some data that supports the idea that largely through online technology, that it can free up an instructor to better understand which students need the extra one-on-one attention, and then what areas they need. So some of the analytics that appear on dashboards now for teachers help them see that. And it also, at the same time, tells them what those weak areas are. Meanwhile, inference engines are serving up to the whole class of students exactly the learning they need, scaffolded to the level where they need that. So to me, the future of teaching, I think if we manage technology well, I think our teachers will be positioned to really make the kind of impact that they signed on for when they started this, that mission-driven impact. And I know as a teacher, sometimes it feels like that's getting cluttered by the paperwork and by the other things, the whirl of it all. But I kind of believe that technology is slowly helping us get back to that mission-driven sort of daily work. So I just wanted to offer that.
Give me one more. Yeah, go ahead, Samantha. Okay.
Well, I was kind of waiting for you, Mark, because you deal with a lot of the pre-service piece. So go ahead if you want to speak to that, and then I'll take over the in-service.
A couple of things, and I be careful what you wish for, Samantha, because I could go here forever. One, we need more teachers of color. I mean, just bluntly, the percentage. We've had an increase in our teachers of color here in our program at Iowa, and it's up to 12 or 14%. And on one hand, that's good that we have an increase, but that's not even close to where we need that to be. And so that is obviously an issue. And on one hand, that's an issue of representation. We need students in schools and learning environments to see teachers of color so that they can think that that's an option for them. But there's going to be a time lag there if we don't have many teachers of color leaving our program. So we need to think about how are we creating all teachers to be, teachers who are culturally responsive and use culturally relevant practices. And that, like I said earlier, build off of student strengths and assets of all students so that we help all students see that if they're interested in teaching, that's an option for them. And then, like David said, it's on one hand, we've started working with Iowa City school districts and having teachers and administrators and counselors helping, encourage students of color who might not have thought about teaching to think about it, and then maybe come out to Kirkwood and take the Education Academy out of Kirkwood and then use that as a way to explore teaching and things like that. But then we need to make sure that there are support systems, scaffolds in place when those students then enter teacher education programs as we work with all of our students. So that's one. I sort of mentioned that we're really fortunate. We get to work with the Kirkwood Regional Center at the University of Iowa up in Coralville. We've got an education academy where high school students take college level coursework that is about teaching. And we get to work with students who are thinking about teaching as a career option, and they get to explore it and think about it and see what some of the different aspects of it are, and even what are the other educationally related options for them that might not be a classroom teacher. And so, I think working with high school students and giving them, helping them have maybe build that enthusiasm is important, but also helping them realize you're discerning. This isn't, I have a 19-year-old and I'm not sure she's figured out what she's going to do for the rest of her life. And I'm not sure I want her to, right? I mean, that's part of what her experience right now is discernment. And therefore, that's what we should be. We want groups of young educators who are interested in teaching. We want them to be thinking about and discussing these challenging issues related to education, but we also want them discerning whether or not this is the career for them as they go through that process. So we've got opportunities in place for that. And then, Mark brings up the technology issue. I think, obviously, over the course of the last 2 years, we have learned to utilize technology for educational purposes in ways that, we hadn't necessarily thought about or had to think about. There's going to be now, in my mind, some people who are very interested in being teachers, but actually being teachers in online environments. And we need to start thinking about how are we preparing those teachers, in addition to people who want to go out and teach in a more traditional in-person, face-to-face setting. So all of those to me are avenues for us to continue to think about, what are we doing and what are our programs, how are our programs set up to encourage lots of different students to think about teaching as an option, to encourage that thinking to happen maybe a little bit earlier, and then to think about these innovative ways that they might engage in education and in the teaching profession.
Great.
And I'll add on to that, where Mark and I are on a statewide task force that's trying to address this and coming up with different options, and what are the problems with things that exist, where can we improve on that, or just completely different options, looking at different avenues for people to join education. A lot of times I think, we do have that, let's catch them early, encourage them, and then here's kind of a path, but then, where are the people that go on a different career and they want to come back and circle around and go into education? How do we encourage and support them going into that? So it's been interesting talking through all of the different possibilities for potential apprenticeships, or, working with para-educators on to becoming full educators, things like that I think are all great and innovative within the training piece. And then I always jump to that in-service, so teachers that are already teachers, and how do we continue to support them and let them practice? And just something that I've learned organically in my time working with educators is that sometimes they may want to try something, and back to that safety piece again, they may not feel they have the time or the safety to do that. So how can we, in training scenarios, give them that time? That's something that I've started building into PD that we are asked to do, where teachers complain about time. We don't have enough time. We don't have enough time. And it's like, I've heard you and I'm going to give you time. And I want you to be able to try it here. And where can we do that in other spaces where maybe there's a summer camp for students, but then teachers that are going through a training get to work with those students and try it out, where it's not like you have to have standards and all of that stuff wrapped in and you have to have outcomes right away, but you get to practice it with students in a flexible scenario to see how it feels. And then you take it to your classroom and you apply it there. How can we give in-service teachers more of that practice instead of this is what you learned 20 years ago and now you just have to kind of absorb things as you go and like build the plane as you're flying it type scenarios. So I'm curious about those aspects as well. And I know that Mark and Bridget, all of your different organizations are doing different aspects of that, but that's kind of where my big thinking goes, like how can we continue that happens in pre-service training that happens along their experience as well.
Yeah, I know we're getting close. The other thing we should, we've learned over the course of the last 2 years, and that we already knew, but connecting this way, right? And so I keep thinking about for me, I think a lot about our newer teachers that are just starting out and keeping them connected with each other in ways that should, when I was teaching in New Hampton, Rowan Story, I was the biology teacher and I was the chemistry teacher, and it was awesome. I loved those two places, but I didn't have other biology teachers that were new like me to connect with. And it would be great for us to keep thinking about ways to utilize technology to keep our new teachers connected and to keep our practicing teachers together and all those sorts of things.
So
I
good.
think so. I think creating communities of practice is a really important piece of all of this, Mark. Absolutely. I was going to just mention one thing. The EdTech Collaborative was lucky enough to be asked to participate in an artificial intelligence ethics committee. And I looked around and there were about 50 companies that are all engaged in, to some degree, making money off artificial intelligence in education technology. So picture the kind of stuff that Amazon uses to help understand you and what you need, and turning that into the classroom and turning it onto our students. And there are so many ethical concerns and issues. And I just wanted to leave this challenge. There were no teachers on that panel. There are 50 companies that are all looking for, how we make money, and they want to make sure that they do it right, but they're missing such an important point of view. And there was only one organization that represented a broad group, and that was mine, right? The EdTech Collaborative. And these are conversations that are happening right now. So teachers that are listening, I would love to connect you if that's something that interests you. These are changing times and it's fascinating to be a part of it, but also these are times to be vigilant.
Awesome. We are down to 2 minutes, and I don't think we came close to covering everything that I wanted to cover. But we did talk about a lot of things. I want to give the last 2 minutes to each of you, take about 30 seconds. And everybody that is here for a reason. I think they want to be involved. I think they want to be engaged. I think they want to know what we as a community can do to help in the work that you're doing. So if you can think through what is that call to action that we want to leave each of these folks with, and if we could end with that, I think that would be a great way to leave this group. So I'll start with you, Samantha, if that's all right. Can I call on you?
Sure. Throw me up first. So what I'd like people to think about when we leave is that there are multiple ways for teachers to get support along their path, whether it's that they're starting off in their career learning, whether they're already teaching, whether they're coming into education. And I encourage you to reach out to anyone on this panel or related. So we've got universities, higher ed, we've got nonprofits, we have the area education agencies, there are 9 of in the state. Reach out, and then we all work together really pretty well to point people in the right direction. So one example of how we're collaborating right now with Bridget, in the AEAs is through the Computer Science Education funding through the state that's helping all of the schools meet the requirements that are coming up starting next year. And that's either sending schools into a panic, or they're not aware of it yet, or they're super excited all across the board. And we're working, with higher ed too on the CS endorsements, pathways for the continuing piece of their connecting them to people like Mark and the Iowa EdTech Collaborative to show them the possibilities and push the why. So I encourage you to, pull your head out of the sand, or maybe you didn't know it was in the sand. Reach out and find those supports by just starting that first step, right? Take that first step to learn what supports are out there and start moving along that path.
Awesome. Bridget, I'll go to you next, if that's all right.
Yep. I think it's the future of education, where we're talking teachers, students, community. It's what Mark said. We got to bring the stakeholders all to the table and hear all the voices. We need teachers, we need businesses, we need the community partners, we need the parents, we need politicians, but we need the students. We need all of those lenses. We need more forums like this that then invigorate conversation, seeing gaps, and then really initiating that. Either you get mad like Samantha and you're like, I'm going for it, or you're like, oh, I see my niche. But it has to be a collaborative piece, and we need all of the voices there at the table to really truly make future change.
Butland, we'll go to you next.
Hey, I'll be brief. Let's start something. The Iowa EdTech Collaborative. Come on over. We'd love to. It's fun, it's engaging, and it's meaningful, valuable work.
Awesome. And then McDermott, we'll end it with you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I wrote down 3 things when we started that I was hoping, and I think we hit them: diversity, integration, innovation. We talked about all 3 of them, but I would just echo everything that you heard from the other 3 here. I don't know, some people, maybe there's a narrative out there that there's hesitancy to interact and collaborate and those sorts of things. I hope you saw today that that's not true, that there's lots of willingness to listen and talk and communicate and hear from each other and grow ideas and those sorts of things. And so, like everybody said, we'd love to hear from you, engage with you, talk with you, and see what we can all do to move forward. So appreciate the opportunity.
Yes.
So good. Thank you so much to each of our panelists for spending the last hour with us. Stephen, I'm not sure if there were any questions that rolled through the chat, but if you can get those to me, I can get those to the panelists. We'll make sure that those get answered from anybody that was participating. You heard it. I think everybody on this panel, including myself, would be more than interested. If you are looking for a place to start to get even more involved, just shoot any one of us an email. We're happy to help connect the dots. I do think, to echo what Mark McDermott just said, there might seem to be some reluctance, but no, there's lots of very passionate people here in the state of Iowa that are interested. And if you're interested, if you're sitting right now on the sidelines, interested in getting more involved, if you're already involved, looking for other ways to get engaged, please just shoot any one of us an email and we'll help connect those dots for you. So this has been such a humbling experience for me to be able to facilitate this with each of you. Thank you so much for this time. And if the Gazette and Iowa Ideas is interested in doing a whole day on topics like this with us, I'll put that shout out to them to just just give us a call. So one last shout out to Kirkwood Community College for being the education track sponsor for Iowa Ideas. There is a ton of other great conference material that is happening throughout the day. So certainly join some of those other sessions throughout the day. So with that, enjoy the rest of your day and have a wonderful Friday.